When someone says, well, how are y'all doing? Well, we're busy. Does it mean that you're making money? Well, yeah, we have money in the checking account, but is that because you're robbing Peter to pay Paul? Is that money that's supposed to be paying a bill and you just haven't paid the bill yet? Or are you actually making money? Making money.
You found the Service Business Mastery Podcast with Tersh Blissett. The Service Business Mastery Podcast is the podcast for service business owners, managers, and those who work in service businesses who are considering going into business for themselves. I'm Brian Orr, the host of the HVAC School Podcast, and I'm honored to be co-hosting these first few episodes with Tersh. So today's episode is all about Introduction to Service Business Mastery. So I'm here with Tersh, and we're going to be talking about service business mastery, as it turns out, which is convenient given that that's the name of this podcast. So thanks for letting me come on and crash the first couple episodes of your podcast, Tersh.
Absolutely. You're welcome anytime.
So Tersh and I were discussing a lot of hard and fast business facts, and then we were also discussing what you call the sound that a goat makes.
It's not a ba.
It's not a ba. No, it's not a neigh. It's not a, well, actually, this is true. Like, when you just call a cow moos, right?
Correct.
But is there a technical term for what that is? I just really am not good at my animal husbandry.
Let me ask my kids. They would probably know.
They would probably know better than we would. So enough about animal noises. By the way, if you do know the answer to that, then please message us or email us, because I really do want to know what the technical name for those sounds are. I could probably just Google it, but why Google when you can just talk about it on a podcast? So this is the Service Business Mastery Podcast, where we're going to talk about, when I say we, I mean Tersh is going to talk about everything related to having a good quality service business. And obviously, we're both HVAC business owners. Tersh also does plumbing. I do electrical in my business. But these kind of truths that we're going to talk about that relate to service business apply to a lot of different types of service businesses. If you have a business that you're going to be traveling around, especially, you have a distributed team going out and doing things at other people's facilities, there's a lot in common. I'm trying to think of what, maybe a farrier. If you're a farrier out there, that's a service business. This tips may apply to you. So today on the podcast, we're just going to kind of introduce Tersh, him and his business and what he does and why he's doing this podcast in the first place. So there you go. I got you all set up there.
Perfect. Another business that this will help is locksmith. I have a couple of friends who are locksmiths here in Savannah, and they use a lot of the same business techniques that I do, same dispatching softwares, that type of things. So a lot of this stuff is not just HVAC specific or plumbing specific. We're going to be trying to tackle the entire service industry. Maybe not necessarily so much as a restaurant or a bar, a little bit different. This is going to be more of your services that you go to the end user. You're going to go to people's homes or businesses and help take care of their needs. That's where this podcast is going. We're aimed towards new business owners, longtime business owners that are still in their van or truck, and they're trying to figure out how to get out. So if I'm riding around in the truck and I'm tired of being in a truck, I've been saying for years, what can I do to get out of this van? I am so sick of riding around this van. Or maybe you love riding around the van. You just want to add some more people onto your crew and maybe just catch the calls that sound like fun. I know that's what Brian does. He just hangs out in the office and has like his dispatcher on like an intercom right next to him. And he says, oh, that's going to be a good call. Let me go out to that one.
That sounds like a capacitor. I'm going to go.
Let me go get that capacitor.
Yeah, that's something I can handle. That sounds simple enough for me.
Maybe that's your ideal end game, to just ride around, be tech support for your company. And our goal is to overload you with as much information and knowledge that maybe you'll get inquisitive, ask questions. We have a Facebook page, we have a group. You have the Blue Collar Roots Network that we are proudly a member of. So you can ask any of the guys there. We have a whole bunch of guys that are in that network that you have a question, we can all brainstorm together. That's the great part about having a network like we have. In future episodes, you'll hear guys that are not even in the air conditioning industry. We're bringing in some guys from outside the industry. We really can brainstorm and get things from outside of our industry to help just shed some knowledge. That's the great thing about technology. Kind of the end game goal here is to bring people in from outside of air conditioning, plumbing, electrical, your locksmith, your couriers, bring everybody in together and let's just brainstorm together and discuss things. work in our industry, don't work in our industry. Well, it does work in that industry, and it may not even be the industry specific. Our goal is to kind of take advantage of the fact that we have the internet, we have podcasts, we have the ability to communicate worldwide and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And that kind of rolls into another thing. I'm not a business coach. Brian's not a business coach. We're not here to sell you anything. We're not here to tease you with just enough information to where you come back and pay for our 5-day course.
Right.
That's going to cost you $15,000. We're here to truly give you as much information as possible. And I'm going to give you things that work for me. And I'm going to give you things that work for friends of mine who are in the industry that I haven't tried yet, but I know that it worked for them. I know that they've been successful. I've talked with them. I'll probably interview them. But the biggest thing with the information that I have to share is implementation. You can implement 3 of the 4 things and not have the success that you expect. Implementation of everything that we give you is going to be key to the most success. If I tell you all of these things that need to be done, or I have done and it's worked great for me, but then you refuse to follow up with a customer that's angry, or you refuse to answer the phone call, or you refuse to reply to an email in a timely manner, those are crucial elements that can cause your business to really struggle. Later on, one of the episodes is going to be about reviews, how important they are to your business, how to get reviews. Should you reply to bad reviews? It's kind of a no-brainer that you should. So we're going to give some points and some tips on Google's best practices, Facebook's best practices, Yelp, Home Advisor. We're going to delve deep into that.
So what I want to say is what makes this podcast different is what Tersh mentioned, is that we're not coaches. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, frankly. I mean, we don't coach people day in and day out. We run businesses. And so there's not taking anything away from people who do professional coaching. But what I think makes what we're going to share here different is that we're speaking from experience. We know the struggle. Both Tersh and I have been guys in the truck ourselves. We get that you can say things all day long and you can make nice tips, but the real work is done when you try to apply that when you're already working until 8 o'clock at night and you have a guy who calls in sick when you know he's not really sick, and so on and so forth. You have all these types of situations that plague a real business. And so we're going to talk about it from a very, very practical standpoint, which leads me into what I want to ask you, Tersh, is if you wouldn't mind telling us about you. Like, how did you get started in the service industry? And then tell us a little bit about your business and why you wanted to create this podcast in the first place.
I'll give you a little overview of my entire history in the industry. After graduating high school, I joined the Georgia Air National Guard, and then I started working at a chemical plant with my father here in town, International Paper, their chemical division. I worked there for about a year, and actually growing up, I had a longtime friend who was in the industry. He worked for an air conditioning company here in town, and I was always intrigued. He would always come home in a service van. He lived right around the corner from me. He would always talk about the things that are really technical. And I became more and more interested in what that industry had to offer. So eventually I got to where the 7-day swing shift was just not my cup of tea at the chemical plant. And I reached out to him and said, "Hey, you think you could get me a job over there working where you're working?" And he said, "Well, I don't know if I can get you a job, but I could definitely get you an interview." So I went in for my interview. I spoke with the owner of the company and the service manager. Both of the guys are extremely knowledgeable, and they offered me the job that day, and I started. And then I put my 2 weeks notice in. 2 weeks after that, my buddy quit the job at that company. So it was funny because the service manager, Brian, he comes out to the van and he's like, "So what do you think about your buddy? He gets you a job and then he quits." I understood what Brandon had going on. Then the next Friday, another technician quit. And then it wound up being me and one other guy in the service department, because throughout that 3 to 4 week period, I moved from being an install helper to a service tech helper apprentice. And that Friday, the other technician already had something going on, and the service manager said, "Hey, you want to take call?" I said, "Sure. I'm a quick learner, but I don't know that I know the ins and outs of being on call. He said, well, you shouldn't get any calls. It's our slow season. So he gave me the pager. And to this day, I still hear that pager in my dreams. That weekend, I must have gotten 15,000 service calls. So pretty much Brian was on the phone with me all weekend. He basically came out to job sites and walked me through everything. And for the next several months, I shadowed the other service tech, and I learned a ton of information just by getting thrown out there. I wasn't afraid to call. I'm that type person. If something doesn't make sense to me, I'm going to ask. I'm going to question everything. I don't want to know just how to fix it. I want to know why it broke, what caused that to break, and how do we prevent it from breaking again in the future. If I know all that stuff beforehand, then it's a lot easier for me to diagnose things in the future. And I learned that really fast. So I got really close with the tech support guys with Train. As soon as they picked up the phone, they wanted to know, have you checked your subcool, your superheat? What are your pressures? What are your volts or your amps? And if you don't have that stuff, Bill would just hang up on you. And so you get all the information, you call them back. And a lot of times you get all the information and then everything just makes sense. You've already figured it out on your own. He really taught me a lot. We've never actually met in person. Bill, he retired, but he taught me so much over the phone just by not telling me the answers, by forcing me to learn. I really appreciated that. And Darren still is with the Train company. And those guys they force you to learn versus just telling you the answer, which is a plague in our industry. You get a senior tech who doesn't want to go through the whole rigmarole. So he's just going to say, well, the answer is a bad capacitor, or the answer is you got a bad compressor. What are your pressures? Have you tried pumping it down? Yeah, you got a bad compressor. So the guys that really mentored me growing up with the other service tech, his name was Woody. The guys from Train, they all really did a good job with helping to mentor me and teach me a lot of things. Not too long after I was in the service, Brian left. He had his conditioned air license. He had had it for many, many years. But an opportunity happened. It came upon him. He left, started his own business. That opened the void as the service manager position. And at that time, we weren't a huge company. We had lots of customers. We only had 3 service technicians, I believe, at that time, and 1 install crew. So it opened a door for me. I had opportunity to go and move into the service manager position. And I was in that service manager's position for about 5 years. Then I went over and did install management as well. And I learned a lot about the business through those 5 years, well, those 7 years between service manager and install manager. It wasn't my company, but I felt so connected to the company that I was going to do whatever it took to make that company succeed. So I really took it personal whenever we did not succeed in a certain area. I really wanted to know the business side of things as far as how to make a business profitable. At that point, I had no idea about the true business side of things, the P&L reports and that type of thing. What I did learn and what I practiced and I gained a wealth of knowledge with was the numbers side of a service department and an install department, and what a fully loaded labor rate is, what gross profit per man day is. There's so many things that a service tech and an installer do on a daily basis that if you just keep track of what the service tech's doing, what the installer's doing, you know the health of your company. When someone says, well, how are y'all doing? Well, we're busy. Does it mean that you're making money? Well, yeah, we have money in the checking account, but is that because you're robbing Peter to pay Paul? Is that money that's supposed to be paying a bill and you just haven't paid the bill yet? Or are you actually making money?
Well, you have a real advantage being that you were a service manager before you started your own business, in that you got to see at least some of the number side. Because the challenge that I think a lot of the people who are listening may have in business is that they were good at what they did. They were good at the work, but they had almost no business experience before they started their business. That's very, very common. And so you had some advantage to be able to see some numbers and see some things before you started your business. But if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about how you started your own business and what you learned as you started down that road.
A lot of things that you're overwhelmed with right off the rip. Even though that I did know a lot of numbers from the previous company, I knew how things work and all that. With me starting out on my own and just being a one man in a truck, Some things were easier than they were at the previous company. Some things were more difficult. Obviously, I didn't have a name out there. I refused to steal customers. I absolutely starved to death before I took a customer from the previous employer. So I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was going to have to go get new customers. That was not a strong suit that I had whenever I was at the previous company. I'm a numbers guy. I was always a numbers guy. I was never a salesman. So for me to go out and sell myself to a new customer, a new client, and they say, well, why are you better than this company here? Well, I can be here quicker, but that's not true because they have more service techs. Then I could say, well, I'll have better prices. Well, maybe, but I also have to pay all my bills. So maybe my prices are the same. I started questioning myself. Am I really a better fit for them than the other company? Without lying to them, sometimes, no, I wasn't a better fit. I was further away from them, so I couldn't get there as quick. I had less service techs. It was a real reality check whenever it came to starting my own business, whenever I started up things. A lot of the things that I did learn, once I just sat down and said, okay, this is for real. I'm going to do this. I have to make this work. I'm not interested in going to work somewhere else. I really want to do this for myself. I started delving down into a lot of books, and a lot of the things that the authors mentioned in the books really just clicked with me. It made sense. So a lot of things that I didn't know right off the bat, insurance, that's a big thing. Do I need insurance? I'm just a one-man show. So a lot of people were saying, well, if you're just by yourself, you don't have to have insurance. You don't have to have workman's comp. You fall under some policy. I don't even recall the name of it. But then other customers would require you to have $1 million worth of coverage. And so then you have to weigh, okay, is it worth getting this customer to pay the extra amount of money to have this insurance? And then ultimately I decided it's in my best interest to have the insurance no matter what. I don't want to skip under the radar. And so then whenever you do that, you have to adjust your pricing accordingly. You can't be the cheapest guy in town if you're carrying $2 million worth of insurance and $1 million worth of insurance on your vehicles. That was a big thing. And if you don't have customers and you have $3 million worth of insurance and you're sitting on the couch, that's a hard pill to swallow. So you really got to get out and hustle. You got to hit the streets. You got to network. Those are things that I didn't really have to do whenever I was at the other company. The phones just rang. The other company was in business since '88. So they had a large customer base. They were real well known in the community. So the phones always rang. It was just the way it was. But one thing about the other company was whenever I was there, it wasn't the technological age. We didn't have iPhones. We didn't have all those things. Google was pretty new. Facebook wasn't even there. So those things were a real advantage to me whenever I came into the industry, whenever I became an owner. That part of the networking really helped out a lot. I was able to go after people in that way and establish a customer base there and then create a history online so that even though I was a small company, I appeared larger than what I was, which was very helpful with some customers. But going back to the things that I really didn't know, the things that were a shock, the biggest thing was the insurance, accounting, making sure that all of your paperwork was completed, and then collecting money. That's a big thing. The P&L reports, and then who's on your balance sheets, who owes you money at the end of the year or end of the month, end of the week, whatever it is. If you have $250,000 in outstanding, people owe you money, that's really going to be a hard pill to swallow whenever you're only doing $400,000 a year, $500,000 a year. You can't have that kind of money out there. People owing you money. That's your money. And to have that conversation with them, sometimes people get offended when you call them. Sometimes people are upset that you called them asking for money. But as the business owner, as the manager, you know that when they called you, yes, you were sitting down eating dinner with your family. You got up, you went and you took care of their air conditioning. You took care of their plumbing. You took care of their electrical need. They didn't have lights in their kitchen and they had family coming over. You dropped what you were doing. You went out there and you took care of the needs that they had. And they understand. They know that you dropped what you were doing and you come and took care of them. They're just trying not to pay the bill, basically, is the way that I found to be. Or they were trying to delay the paying on the bills. The biggest thing was we would do a lot for apartment complexes. And the managers at apartment complexes sometimes will get bonused based off of the amount of money that they spend or the lack of money that they spend for a month. And so sometimes they will wait and pay all of your bills 1 month. And so you could be sitting on a bill. They may be sitting on a bill for 6 months. Hopefully they wouldn't sit that long. But I have several customers in the past who have waited 6 or 8 months to pay a bill, and they paid everything in one bill because they get paid. They get bonuses based off of the amount of money they save the company. And then they just bunch all of their bills up into 1 month and pay their outstanding balances and just take a loss that month on their bonus. And the great property managers, they'll tell you what they're doing. They're going to say, hey, look, I'm trying to get such and such bonus this month. Is it okay if I pay you in 30 days, in 90 days, whatever? If someone ever came to me and said that, typically 9 times out of 10, I'm like, yes, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. As long as you're upfront with me. Where I'm going to get frustrated is if you lie to me constantly. Oh, the check's in the mail. Can you do this? I promise that we've already mailed out the check. Corporate has it. I don't know what their hands are tied up in. And finally, I just bypassed the property managers and would go straight to corporate. And corporate say, well, we don't even have that invoice. We see where you have a PO. The property gave you a PO, but we don't have that invoice from you. I said, well, here, let me fax you an invoice. Let me email you an invoice. And I'd get paid in 10 days and have a ticked off property manager because I bypassed them. That's not my end game. That's not my goal. I was not wanting to bypass that property manager. If that property manager had been honest with me, I could have sat on that $200 invoice, $300 invoice, $3,500 invoice, whatever, if they had been honest, but they weren't honest. They were lying to me. So that's one of the biggest struggles is understanding their game whenever you first start out. I talk to some of the old timers in the industry and they're like, oh yeah, that's what, they're just holding that so that they can get a bonus. Like, well, geez, that'd been nice to know before I got all frustrated and lost my cool with them or threatened to dump them as a customer or not go out and catch a service call for them. It would have been nice to know what the reasoning behind that. And that's the biggest challenge for new guys in the industry and girls in the industry when they come into it is the things that the business owners never told them. Even if they were a service manager, I was a service manager for several years and had no idea about a lot of these things. And the owner of the other company, he wasn't hiding things from me. It just wasn't things that I needed to know. I wasn't an accountant. I wasn't a bookkeeper. I didn't need to know all that information. Sometimes diarrhea of the mouth is a bad thing. Whenever an owner is just constantly bombarding you with their problems, hey, look, we're not going to have enough money this month, blah, 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 blah. It turns into service techs just looking for another job, basically, or they're just sour with listening to that conversation all the time.
All right. So you've been in business now, 4 years for yourself, something like that?
We're right at 4 years.
And you've seen pretty consistent growth in your business. And in fact, you actually had a pretty decent even first year in business. Tell us a little bit about the path that you've taken as far as the growth of your business.
With my business structure, the current business is myself and a partner. We started this company the first year when we joined forces. He had a few customers, I had a few customers, and into the first year, it was not a very long year actually, because we started the company in beginning of August. By the end of December, we were at 245K. We were at 245,000 in revenue. So, we were really rocking and rolling. We came upon some customers who had a lot of problem systems. So that really helped out. We've focused so much on property management companies. We do a lot of property management. So this helped us out a lot. As a small business, it's really going to help out a lot. The second year, we did about 625-ish by the end of the year. And then we pretty much doubled it. We've been on a pattern of about 100% growth. And I really wanted to do that again this year. But I also wanted to focus on changing up a few things here and there. I wanted to try some things. So our third year, we were at 1.2 million. And then by the end of this year, we should be at 1.6 million. So obviously that's not 100% growth. I wanted to be at 2 million at the end of this year. It's not going to make it. We have had a rather mild summer and a mild winter. So it was a really weird situation. So that, along with us trying other new things, we haven't grown the same way that I wanted to grow, but we're still continuing to grow. And as I implement everything, even the things that I talk about aren't things that we do personally, but I know that they work for friends of mine. They work for other companies. So I do plan on implementing them, and I plan on getting that 2 million mark next year for sure.
All right, so this podcast, we're going to cover a lot of different topics that are going to be good for new owners, so people who are just out in the truck for the first time and they want to know how to set up a proper business. Maybe even some people who are thinking about starting a business. Longtime owners who are maybe more in that veteran phase and they're looking for new ideas. Managers, service managers, installation managers, any type of manager, depending on the type of business that you're in. And then also, we're going to be talking to people who are in that phase where they're still in the truck or they're still doing the work, and maybe they want to spend less time working in their business and more time working on their business and wanting to know how to kind of make that transition. And then we're going to have a lot of technicians listening to this. Both Tersh and I are well connected into the HVAC technician community. And we hope to kind of reveal to technicians what it actually takes to run a business, because there's a general feeling in the industry that the owners are the ones getting rich and, having all the fun, and the technicians are getting beat on. And, maybe in some circumstances that is the case, but that certainly hasn't been both our experience. And so we want to kind of show a peek behind the curtain of what it's really like to own a business. And Tersh kind of revealed the size of his business. I've been in business now for 12 years. Similar situation where it's a partnership. Me and my father started it together. I run the air conditioning and all the service side of the business, and he does construction. We've grown over those 12 years from just me being the only one in a truck to now having 60 employees. And our service side of our business alone will do about $7 million this year. So we've taken that kind of the same general path that Tersh has taken, only just doubling it all the way up to the 12-year mark. And not quite. In fact, we didn't grow as quickly as you did, Tersh. So you've done a really good job. The first few years, we really struggled. Of course, it was also, we started in 2005. So we had a pretty bad economic crash a few years after we started, which was challenging.
I got in the industry in 2005, and I was a service manager in that 2008 time period. And a lot of the companies around us were new construction guys, and they were rocking and rolling new construction. And then they all got into service in 2008, 2009-ish, because they seen that was kind of where they needed to go, because the housing market obviously crashed. So that really created a challenge for us in 2008 and 2009, 2010. How do we combat against these guys that are used to new construction prices, and they're going out and doing a service call for $45 and we're at $89? How do we even have that conversation to start with on a customer? So yeah, I can feel your pain on the 2008 year model. Obviously it wasn't my company, so I wasn't really sweating it like you would have been sweating it, because with it being in your own business. But I definitely remember the challenges back then whenever we were facing people who really didn't have the money to pay their bills.
All right, so this episode was really just an introduction to Tersh, his business, what we're going to be talking about on the podcast. There's going to be a lot of very specific topics that we do. We've got some very kind of deep topics that we're going to be getting into in future episodes. Like Tersh mentioned, Service Business Mastery is part of the Blue Collar Roots Network, which is a collection of a bunch of different really good podcasts. A lot of them are in the HVAC space. And again, we're going to talk about a lot of things that are HVAC specific, but a lot of things that go into all of the different service businesses here at Service Business Mastery. You can find more about all of the podcasts that are part of the Blue Collar Roots Network by going to bluecollarroots.com. Pretty obvious URL there. And you can listen to all of them, including this podcast right there. I do suggest that if you do want to listen to this regularly, use a podcast app. If you have a iPhone, you can use the podcast app right on your phone. Subscribe, give Tersh a review, let him know that you either love or hate what he's doing. It's always good to start off with a 1-star review. We'll talk about that later. Just kidding. Don't. Give him a review, something above 4. We're not saying you have to give a 5, but just above 4 would be perfect on the reviews. Thanks, Tersh, for doing this. Our next episode is actually going to be on dispatcher responsibility, so I'm looking forward to that.
And also, don't forget, we have a Facebook page and a Facebook group. That's a really easy way to give some feedback also. We obviously want your 5-star review. We want your 4-star review.
4.5-star to 5-star review.
5-ish. But if you do have some constructive criticism, any kind of recommendations, if you have some burning desire to be on the podcast, if you want to be scrutinized in that kind of way, let us know. Reach out and on the podcast, or reach out to me on my personal Facebook page, our Facebook group, add, invite, share.
Yeah, it's easy to find. So the group is just facebook.com/service business mastery. So that's facebook.com/service business mastery. And if you want to find the group, just go in Facebook and type in Service Business Mastery and look up the group and join. And if you know the secret handshake and the special decoder ring, then we might let you in. All right. Thanks, Tersh. Looking forward to doing this next time.
Thanks, sir.
here again, one thing that I wanted to mention, just because, it's not nice to ask for things in the company of the person that you're asking for it, but he would really appreciate, when I say he, of course I mean Tersh, he would appreciate it if you would go and subscribe to his podcast. You can do that on the podcast app. You can do that on Stitcher. You can do that on Google Play. Now, because this is the first episode, sometimes when I release it, you may hear this and you may say, well, I can't find it on iTunes. I can't find it on Google Play. Well, sometimes they release the first time a little differently. So sometimes iTunes can take a couple days, so be patient. But when it does come out, if you wouldn't mind subscribing either on your iPhone or on iTunes on your computer, that's all appreciated. Subscriptions make a big difference in how Apple ranks podcasts, and then also leaving a review is also super helpful. So do that if you're willing. Also, you can check out all of the podcasts that are part of the Blue Collar Roots Network by going to bluecollarroots.com. Thanks for being here. We will see you next time, or should I say next week? I don't know. Maybe we'll do more than one this week. Little secret, we will do more than one this week on the Service Business Mastery Podcast.